the country manager of Microsoft Belarus, again joining us online. We have Zurab Sanikidze, who is the chairman of the Public Services Development Agency of the Ministry of Justice here in Georgia. He joins us live and in person. And finally, we have Vitalie Tarlev, who is the Secretary of State for IT Communications of the Ministry of Economy and Infrastructure of the Republic of Moldova, who again joins us online. And you will find all the speakers and panelists bios online, and you can read through those, and I would encourage you to do so. It's rather impressive. The format of today's session will essentially consist of 3 parts. Each speaker will make a very brief 5-minute opening remark on the topic at hand, i.e. the state in a smartphone, the digital transformation of public services. That will be followed by a brief panel discussion where I'll be asking a set of questions to all 5 panelists. And then finally, time permitting, we will have Q&A. I'd like to prioritize those that are joining us online. So if you do, there should be an online opportunity to provide your comments, which will be transferred to me. And then, of course, we'll also take questions from the audience here in Tbilisi. So with that said, I've done enough talking for this morning, and let us turn to our distinguished speakers and panelists. To begin with, I would like to call on Bokhodir Ayupov, again, the Chief Investment Officer of the IT Park in Uzbekistan. Bokhodir, over to you, please, for your quick 5-minute introductory remarks.
Uzbekistan is going through major transformations right now. There is a famous Chinese saying that goes as, it's not a saying, it's a curse. May you live in times of change. So in our case, we perceive this as a blessing because it is really an exclusive experience, especially for a citizen to see this all happening from within the country. There is a lot of changes that we see right now. And IT is one of the biggest areas that sees emphasis from the highest level of the country administration. Our president is putting very high stakes and high hopes for IT area, and he has so far been giving a lot of support to this area. And one of the decisions, one of the very effective decisions that he has made was establishment of IT Park, which has so far been playing a role of a stimulator of IT sector. And as I will discuss with you later, there's a lot of components that we used, that really shook up this so far unshaken area. So there's a lot of changes in public sector. As a matter of fact, the president, IT was the president's tool from the very beginning of his work as the president. And IT tools have given him the best information that he could use to win over the sympathy of all people. And provided I have time later, I will explain this in more details. But I am very happy to join this discussion, and I'm ready to tell you everything that we are going through as part of digital transformation in Uzbekistan.
All right, thank you so much, Bokhodir, for those introductory remarks. I'd like to call on Oleksandr Bornyakov, again, the Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation of the Ukraine, who's joining us online. Again, Oleksandr, over to you for some quick, brief 5-minute opening remarks, please.
Well, thank you, and good morning. Ukraine is also going through major digital transformation things, and one of them, like a year ago, it's kind of universal right now. Ministry of Digital Transformation was formed. It was created for the first time in the history of Ukraine, and it set very ambitious goals for itself like move 100% of the government services online, and do many other things, which I will explain later in with our presentation in details. But this is also very important in our country, and I think it's a good time. There was a major change in the government. We elect a new president with a completely brand new parliament, and this gave us opportunity to kind of rethink all what we did before. And right now, I think we have reached a lot of great things, which I also talk about later, and you'll see them and share this expertise. So I'm happy to be here today and share our recent success stories and tell about the past, what we going, and also, I don't know, consume other people's experience here. So I wish we have all fruitful and enjoyable day. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Oleksandr, for those introductory remarks, and look forward to hearing from your experience of leading an actual ministry of digital transformation. I know a number of countries across the world, for that matter, have gone down this route, and it'd be great to hear a little bit about what some of the lessons learned from that have been, and certainly during the panel discussion we'll have that opportunity. Next, I'd like to call on Evgeny Koren, country manager again of Microsoft in Belarus, please.
Good morning, colleagues. Great to be here. Thank you for invitation, and I think we will have all of us will have a fruitful discussion. Yeah, indeed. I have privilege working in let's say international corporation, and we see the changes which are happening across the countries, across the whole world. I'm based in Belarus, but I'm also responsible. I'm working in a region which is called multi-country, CE multi-country, and it consists of 24 countries. A few of them you can see on my background. I made it on purpose. So this is, I think, close to our today's topic regarding the possibility of applying kind of universal solutions to the digital transformation. And this seems to me doable and realistic, because actually what we observe in the countries, and by the way, I also responsible as a public sector account executive for Georgia as well, is that all of them have the same, let's say, challenges. This is like rising citizen expectations on the services, budgetary constraints, changing demographic, global competition for investments, for money for sure, access to the infrastructure, technology, and for sure public sector reform agenda, because all the, let's say, governments are always trying to change to be in time with a modern agenda. And having all that, I assume that, let's say, we can for sure find kind of universal approach to resolve these issues. I also, let's say, give some reference to Bokhodir. Thank you for interesting presentation. I also participated in, let's say, modernization of the legislation which was applied to high-tech park in Belarus, called the high-tech park 2.0. So I was a part of a working group. We had a lot of discussions on that, and it was also a great experience. And I see that for sure it's a global trend, and it's competition as well, part of this competition. So that's it. Wish you all to have a great day and fruitful discussions.
Great. Thank you so much, Evgeny, and look forward to the panel discussion and hearing your private sector view on, again, the issue of the government and digital transformation. Next, we have our in-person guest, Zurab Sanikidze, again, who's the chairman of the Public Services Development Agency, the Ministry of Justice here in Georgia. Zurab, over to you, please, for your introductory 5 minutes. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. Hello everyone, the ones who are present here and the ones who are online. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to be in Georgia as well as online. It's my first time actually to participate in that conference, so again it's a huge pleasure. I will use my 5 minutes. I'll do my best to use 5 minutes, in terms of explaining what the agency is doing, and especially how we've done and how we undergone through the challenges, especially during the COVID-19, and in terms of the public service delivery process. Very briefly, for those maybe who are not very familiar yet, the Public Service Development Agency, which is under the Ministry of Justice, and I have the privilege to be the chairman of, is one of the key service providers, public service providers to our Georgian citizens, starting from the birth certificate until the death certificate. So what is in the middle, it's almost all of them are under the Public Service Development Agency. And the how service development itself and how service providing is operating in Georgia, it's so-called one-stop shop principle. When for those I believe are familiar, you are entering the so-called public service halls in the big villages and community centers in remote villages and in big cities and in the villages. And you, about in 10-15 minutes, will get more than 200 services, whatever you need, starting from the passports, ID cards, and as I said, different type of certificates. So almost all of them are done by the Public Service Development Agency, and some of them also by other agencies, also operating under the Ministry of Justice, because Ministry of Justice is one of the key service provider agencies in the country. What are our key functions? You know, we build on the basis of the civil registry, but now it's called Public Service Development Agency. So the concept itself is far broader than the only civil registry, if we may so-called only civil registry. But now let me concentrate to our key discussion today, which is the distance services and the public service providing itself. We have the services which are in place when you are entering the public service hall, but most of the services, and I would say almost all of them, are remotely done for distance services. And especially what we've done was during the COVID-19, because when there was a pandemic situation, it's still ongoing, of course, the challenges. People are not necessary to come and to arrive at the building itself, right? So what we've done is all the services to make remotely and to have the distance services. Everything that was not done before, or whatever was done before, we expanded it. We made the new functions, and now every citizen of Georgia, just with calling or connecting on through Skype or specific services, without arriving at the public service hall, we can deliver all the services remotely. That's one of the key achievements, I would say, we've undergone through this very limited period of time, but done proactively. Our services are, of course, also suitable for so-called persons with disabilities. That's also one of the key areas in terms of the public service providing issues. Very briefly, some of the key projects which we operate right now. Unified Immigration Analytical System, so-called UMAS, I think it's very important to mention, because that's based on the so-called big data, which gives us the possibility to elaborate different reports, regularly update the country's migration profile, and conduct statistic-based surveys, which is very important in terms of the policy development and policy cycle, as we all know, to have the statistics and to make our decisions, informative decisions, based on the specific statistics. So I would suggest actually all the countries, and not only countries represent here, maybe to discuss about that in more detail. Digitalization of civil acts is one of another key very important areas for us. What does it mean? You know, before digitalization area, everything was and still is the hard copies. So what we are doing is, and it's in line with our EU integration priorities as well, to digitalize all the civil acts in order to have everything digital, and that will be make easy our life and a life of our citizens. The next part I would like to highlight is our innovative laboratory, so-called Service Lab. Actually, that's what we know is the first public sector innovation laboratory in Georgia, which was established by the Public Service Development Agency under the public administration reform, which is many of the countries sitting here, representing here, are undergoing. So what's the idea of this laboratory? Very briefly, all the key reforms what Georgia is doing through the service delivery process, it has to be gone through this laboratory because we have the special persons, qualified persons in order to work on the very specific projects. Due to the interest of the time, I'm not going into detail, but of course if you have any questions, it will be more than happy. Some of the areas which we have the so-called ID documents and in line with the ICAO standards. Of course, we have to mention the biometric passports and the ID cards. That's why it's important, because it's important, of course, in terms of not to have any issues of falsification and to maintain the accuracy. And again, when it comes to the distance services, today the Georgia is able to deliver remotely in a distant manner any of those services mentioned by me, including the passports and the ID cards. We don't need the persons to arrive at the public service hall. For the Skype, we just take your biometric identification information, and then we will deliver via post the document you need in place. Public Service Development Agency is the only trust provider in Georgia, so that's the agency which has undergone through international certification and through audit process, and we are the only qualified trust providers. What does it mean? Qualify the signature, qualify the seal, and qualify the timestamp. That's all which is Public Service Development Agency is doing, and that's all we are trying to work on it right now. And more than 1 million people have already, according to our recent statistics, e-signature in Georgia. So you don't need to go in the building and to arrive in the place. You're just sitting in the home, and without any hard signature, electronically, you are validating your document. And some of the last parts, you know, it's important when I was mentioning the service delivery process, it's not only the government, but government and the private sector cooperating together. That's the one part. And government with the local municipalities cooperating together, that's the second part. And you see on the presentation, more than 55 municipalities. In more than 55 municipalities, we have established the so-called municipal management system. So the service providing at the government level and service providing at the municipal level. So to operate together in the same line in the interest of our citizens. And we are also supporting our different private sector partners, of course. And also, very importantly, maybe we have to mention the ship registration and issuing of the certificate for our Maritime Transport Agency. That's also done by the Public Service Development Agency. But in my short presentation, I would like to summarize and conclude on the part with these some of the key areas which I mentioned with the Public Service Development Agencies providing to our agency, to our citizens. But again, the most important part, and especially during the COVID-19, was we were able before as well, but even further during the COVID-19 to work on that remotely and through distance services. So everything is, again, accessible to our citizens distantly. They just need to call, they just need to reach us through our special hotlines, and we will provide all the services without interaction, without vis-a-vis visiting our citizens. And that's one of the key areas. Of course, there are challenges. I'm not saying there are no challenges, of course, but that's the direction Georgia is moving forward right now.
Thank you so much, Zurab, for that. And I can tell you firsthand, having been myself accredited online, the system works well. I'm also very pleased to see that much of what you do transcends even some of the more basic functions such as identification, birth certificates, death certificates, etc. But even such critical and important topics such as procurement, where you have an e-procurement process in place, where the majority of state contracts or procurement, the bidding processes, the awards, everything is put online, which of course adds to the transparency and the trust that the citizens and the private sector have in the government. to ensure that these very critical processes are done in an open and transparent and inclusive manner. So well done, and I know that another number of other countries have similar initiatives, and very pleased to see those. In particular, during the COVID times, as you correctly mentioned, we've seen that when it comes to the digitization of social transfers, you can actually help avoid queues in banks where you have people lining up to receive their social transfers, pension transfers, which are often hotbeds of COVID infections, and this can be done remotely now, where people at their own leisure can pick up, withdraw cash from automatic tellers.
So, if I'm allowed just one sentence. For Georgia, it's very important, and for all our partners present here, the e-democracy. Georgia several years ago was the chairman of the Open Government Partnership, the one of the most important platforms, I believe, in the world in terms of the e-democracy and government and private sector and non-governmental sector cooperation. And the public service development and the e-democracy was and is still one of the key pillars for us. And thanks for mentioning the e-procurement system, but not only, and that the areas is actually that Georgia is working on. That's the demand of the society. That's the most important, I believe, and the government has to be in line with it, of course.
Agreed. So I want to turn the floor to our last speaker, and Vitalie Tarlev, who is again the Secretary of State for IT and Communications at the Ministry of Economy and Infrastructure of the Republic of Moldova. Vitalie, over to you, please, for your introductory remarks.
5 minutes for me, it's quite difficult to be ready to provide a message. I'm for too long in this business, and I have a lot to say about how IT changed Moldova, and it really did. Just in brief, I'll try to convince you in that thesis. So we achieved a lot in last at least 10 years. We had 2 strategic documents, e-Moldova 2010 and Digital Moldova 2020. We've addressed at least 4 key areas during this period of time. Firstly, this is broadband infrastructure, this is industry, IT industry, this is digital content, and this is digital education. We had it turned out we had a clear vision at that point. I was a part of those teams working on this policy framework implementation. And I can say for sure, we have to think, me and my team, we had permanently to think on how to not let politicians to forget about digital development and IT industry development objective. So more than 10 governments, 10 ministers, and permanently we had to promote this objective. Permanently we had to provide new ideas, draft of laws, taxation model, and so on and so on. But it really worked, and I can assure that we have agenda next. We are working on how to move things further. So far, on infrastructure side, we have now more than 99% of physical presence of optical fiber optics in every village, every locality of Moldova. We have a coverage of 98% of mobile internet. 98%, it's quite a figure. So it helped us to reach more than 80% access to internet coverage. 1 gigabit internet in Moldova is available at about $15 per month. It's a very good ingredient for IT industry, for digitization to move forward. We've been in a top 10 broadband affordability index and in a higher medium internet speed and so on and so on. It worked very well. We have to praise legislators, and we have to praise private investors, which did that. And we have to praise final users, which made use of this infrastructure. From another side, IT industry was permanently on focus, and we've reached a very good objective. We have a dedicated legislation and taxation model for IT industry, for IT companies. We have 3 years operating Moldova IT Park, which has already 600 residing companies. 1/3 of them are foreign companies, 1/3 of them are new created companies. It actually helps us to have a stable rate of maintaining IT professionals in the country. 10K engineers, IT engineers are working in the IT park, 30,000 ICT professionals are actively working in Moldova. For a country with 2.5 million population, it's quite a figure. So what we achieved in this regard and what did this policy? Actually, we had quite a constant share in GDP, 7%, but what happened in last 4 years? Actually, we have a balance now, 3% from less than 0.5% in GDP for IT industry. In 3 years, we have 3% in GDP for IT industry. We have a balance between telco industry and IT industry. Now the IT industry is one of the driver of our exports, and during the COVID pandemic crisis, actually it worked as a stabilizer for keeping the rate of exports. Actually, the IT industry grew up in last 4 years 3.5 times. It's quite a figure. So this is about young talented people, this is about good jobs here in the country, and this is one of the main ingredients of digital society, and we keep this in mind. We work hardly on content, so the government is the main driver in this regard. We have a fully functional interoperability framework. We have a national coverage and we have options or alternatives in digital signature. Every public servant and every CEO of private companies have a digital signature. More than that, there are options in digital ID, there are options on mobile ID, and it really helps. This is an infrastructure element, and keep it in mind when moving forward with digital innovation in countries and region. We have an online payment system which covers entire governmental public part and pay. We have a portal which is, I'm just mentioning the most relevant. Licenses and permits activities after the reform, we came up from more than 15 licenses and permitted acts to 180. Most of them are already digitized, and we actually last month we promoted in the parliament the law obliging every permissive acts to be available online, and it really works. On education, just who is most interested in these figures, please visit Moldova IT Park website. Google will help you. Please visit the e-governance agency of Moldova. Google will help you. And the last is in my list of ingredients is education, last but not least. So the TechWheel project, again, Google will help you. It's about alternative education to alternative digital education. In 3 years, more than 65K beneficiaries, more than 300 companies start up there. So this is one of the projects which is broadly supported by development partners and actually helps us to promote projects in education. One of the last is digital education from primary school, from the first degree classes to the post. The digital education is a mandatory discipline now. So actually, this was our approach. We had a vision, we had a strategic framework. We succeeded with a supportive legislation and taxation system, 7% on general turnover for IT companies, which is the lowest taxation level in the region. We succeeded to get and to create the support of the IT community, and it helps us to keep it in mind, to keep it on agenda of politicians permanently, that IT is an enabler. IT is that instrument to transform the society. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Vitalie, and I'm really glad you mentioned some, to my mind, critical aspects of the government's digital transformation. One is having a very clear strategy, framework on and how to proceed. The second is to make sure that you put in both the public and the private sector partnership to allow the digital infrastructure to be built so that all citizens can obtain access to these public services, including in more rural and remote areas. And again, it's impressive to hear just how far broadband coverage is available now in Moldova. And then finally, to focus on very specific use cases that allow ordinary citizens to benefit and to see the opportunities that, again, the digitization of public services and the broader digital economy bring to the people. So thank you to all panelists really for sharing your insights and your experiences. We now move to part two, which is the panel discussion, and I would like to essentially focus on two questions to all panelists. And I would like to ask, given time constraints, all panelists to keep their answers as concise as possible so that we do have some time for question and answer at the end. And my question is as follows. We know today that both firms and companies across the Eurasia region, and now indeed governments across the Eurasia region, are embarking on the digital transformation agenda. And we've heard today that there are a number of countries that are really taking a leadership role. We have Ukraine, we have Belarus, we have Georgia, we have Uzbekistan and Moldova, as we just heard, who are really in some ways, breaking the ground and leaders in really establishing, again, the digitization of these public services. So my question is as follows. While every digital journey, of course, is unique, I wonder is it possible perhaps to apply or to design more standardized solutions for all countries here in the Europe and Central Asia and Eurasia region and perhaps even beyond? So I guess what is the role of open source projects to further the story and to ensure that the digital transformation journey in the public sector really benefits all countries across the region? And I'd like to start off perhaps with Bokhodir again, and to get your views, and then we'll go through the other panelists as well. So Bokhodir, over to you please for this first question.
Thank you very much. Now, just a small addition to what I was saying about a very strong political will that comes all the way from the president. Now, one of the reasons why IT area and digitization of economy receives so much support is because the administration of the country realizes that IT is one of the sure ways of addressing the problem of our country being double landlocked. So now the question that you stated is really very interesting because, to be honest, there is no definite answer to it. And this is the conclusion that we came to practically, not theoretically. Now, we had cases where it worked and many more where it hadn't. I'm talking about the models available. Yes, we've gone through a lot of success stories, cases of Georgia, of Estonia, Ukraine, Belarus. Now, the logical suggestion then would be, to come up with your own model. And we did, not in IT area, but in terms of the economic model. And we had our own model of economic development. The result, we lost 25 years, to be honest. So it's good to have, the tested models available for analysis, but faulty to assume that you can just take it and apply to your country. And at the same time, major experiments may be quite risky, unless, of course, you engage a high-caliber professional who have, vast experience in running these kind of experiments on the country level. So now, when you say an open, using these models as an open source project, it's good to have them as an open source project because you will have to fiddle with them a lot. At the same time, it would be a great mistake to assume the same, to make same assumptions for, CIS countries, because we have a very, very important, and I would even say decisive factor as mentality and culture. And this is something that we have experienced. We had a lot of cases where, after very thorough analysis of international experience, we just took those models and applied, and it failed. But at the same time, we had many cases where those models worked. IT Park is one of them. Evgeny just mentioned that he has been taking part in developing the legislation in IT area of Belarus. And we have taken this model from Belarus, the high technology park. And IT Park has taken that model, and it is working quite successfully. We have so far 412 companies registered as our residents, and the benefits that we have that we apply to them are helping them a lot, to focus on their main area of activity, and not only the benefits, but also we have gone a little bit too far. We have expanded our areas of support. Not only do we, support our residents, but IT Park to this day works as the primary area of for developing an ecosystem of startups. This is the place where young, talented people can actually come with their ideas and develop them into effective business projects. A very big area that IT Park works on is education. There is a big gap between demand for IT specialists in our market, just like in any other market, and the supply. So we have been working on this model to include education of IT specialists. And one of the long-term projects that we have recently engaged in is opening a representative office in the United States with the aim of engaging IT projects and business processing, outsourcing projects from the United States to Uzbekistan. So as a, sort of a conclusion, I can say that you cannot use, take one model and apply it to all the country or to any country without taking it, and this is something important I would like to mention, a user-centered approach. Whatever model we apply to our country, we have to take it through a user-centered approach that would cover mentality, culture, world outlook of end users, and that is the approach that I have been promoting in Uzbekistan among state services for all these years. And I cannot stress enough the importance of using a user-centered approach when applying any model, would it be IT area or to any other area of economy.
Great, thank you so much, Bokhodir. Can I turn to Oleksandr next to talk about Ukraine's view on, again, this question of open source? Over to you, Oleksandr.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I personally consider that doing everything from scratch in IT is a huge waste of resources and time, because sometimes it's just so easy to get their other people experience and just move it and maybe extend it to some degree, update it, but not just come up with anything from scratch. And as example, we in Ukraine, we constantly were observing Estonia experience as they were one of their top countries in the world from electronic government and digital economy services. So, for instance, we have taken their X-Road project experience and moved it to Ukraine. So we created a sort of a platform for interoperability for different registers to connect all the registers in Ukraine, and created a platform based on that called Trembita. So now, like in Ukraine, it's like 300 different registers, and now most of them are connected with this platform. And this was the road that Estonia first taken, and then we saved a lot of time. We used their expertise, and this was a great example of probably like a standard approach to something. Another example that we working on now, it's a service called electronic residency. We now implementing it in Ukraine using Estonia experience again. And with this project, we aim to give ability for foreign citizens, for people around the world to register business in Ukraine, not even coming to a country. So we used a lot of their experience at this point to come up with a platform, and I think we saved a lot of time, because it took like, I know, years for them to finally release it, and in less than a year we actually will be, I think in a year we will be able to provide the service in Ukraine. Also, I mentioned about different goals of Ministry. One of them is to teach 2 million people digital skills, and there we also use the technical platforms, and we kind of created our own platform, but based on Academy Ocean and other successful examples. By the way, the platform so far been used by 200,000 people from rural areas and mostly elder people. So because if we aim to give them all the government services online, we have to be confident that they can use those services and have the ability to kind of figure out what we offer them. So of course, but being said that, we totally support using a common approach, standardized approach, and open source software. But each country has its own, I don't know, like small details, I would say, like cornerstones. And of course, we kind of reform and transform and do a lot of refactoring on the standard decisions. I mean, when I say decision, I mean the experience that someone already had. We have to carefully consider when we move into a country, because from my personal experience and experience that I observe from my other colleagues, that you can't just simply move something from one country to another. That's a lot of adjustments have to be done. So great. That's the quick.
Thank you so much, Oleksandr.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, very much appreciated. Can I turn to Evgeny next? And again, if I could just please remind all panelists to keep their remarks as succinct as possible. Again, we do want to allow questions from the online and audience here in Tbilisi. So please, Evgeny, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. So the question was regarding the open source approach.
Correct.
I can say maybe it is will sound surprisingly, but having GitHub as one of the last acquisition, and I should say, according to statistics, I saw Microsoft one of the biggest contributor into open source community in the world. So, and this is maybe sound surprisingly, but it explains a lot about the strategy and what we are doing in the company. But I'm totally agree with what was said by the colleagues, so that every country have some different differentiators, like cultural, economical, etc. And universal solutions could be applied, but not to the certain, let's say, just to the certain extent. So from infrastructure point of view, I think we have great unique solutions which could be applied for every country. And you know, let's say some out-of-box products for collaborations, etc. They are quite universal from the functionality point of view, and they can be applied for sure to solve some of the challenges that countries have. So just to summarize, I should say that you should apply what was mentioned also by colleagues, your own digital strategy. You should work on it extensively to understand based on your core priorities, based on your KPIs, and just follow the plan. So starting building it from first layer to the top, so adding new pieces of the puzzle. So that things for me is the most effective approach, which we see also as we work extensively in Estonia and Ukraine as well. In Moldova, I know that my colleagues are working as well. So and there is no silver bullet, but there are some elements which can be for sure reapplied. And open source is also not how to say a silver bullet as well, because for some projects, yes, it's the most effective solution, you know, to make it as customized as possible for your current task. But sometimes it's much more cheaper to apply one of the existing solutions, and also you should keep in mind the TCO, right? So to maintain the fully let's say, custom outsourcing solution, sometimes it's pretty much expensive, and you also have to hire people to maintain it, and you have all the advantages of having custom solutions, but from one side, but from the other side, it's quite inexpensive to support these kind of solutions, because you have no unified support, a vendor to whom you can just turn and ask for support. That's it from my side.
Great, thank you so much, Evgeny. Let's turn to Zurab here next for, again, the answer to the same question, please.
Sure. My brief answer would be yes, it can be applied, but now let me elaborate briefly about it. The key role, together with the governments, of course, has also international organizations and multilaterals like World Bank, for example, and thank you very much for your continuous support to Georgia, and the private companies, and all of the key stakeholders, if we may use such a word, who are in line with all of the priorities we've been mentioning before. You know, of course, I agree with our colleagues and speakers mentioned about uniqueness of each country. Definitely, no, I will not take too much time about that. Each country is the unique. So applying it is not and never means the copying and pasting. Of course, it means lessons learned and sharing experience, and then based on your own specificities to apply in your domestic infrastructure. But we have some of the, I will mention just some examples, you know, mentioned today or maybe not mentioned today. Ukraine, for example, has very good, which I am familiar of, ProZorro and DoZorro procurement system. I believe it can be applied and it can be used as a, you know, as an experience to some other countries. Our colleague from Moldova also mentioned the taxation model, online taxation model. I believe it can be used as a source in terms of applying in our different domestic legislations. Estonia has the far advanced electronic election system, so I believe it can be as an open source applied in different our partners. The Georgia, I mentioned in my presentation, I believe you remember about the UMAS, the migration analytical system. That's one of the unique systems we have right now, and it still needs to be improving, of course, which provides you the source for analyzing the statistics of migration profile of the country in order to plan the policy of the country respectively. So I believe that's one of the important sources, which operates in Georgia. I have not mentioned in my presentation, but I believe you're aware about it, so-called budget monitoring system, which was introduced by State Audit Office of Georgia, and it's one of the international platforms, received also award recently, which gives the possibility to every citizen of Georgia online monitor the expenditure of the government. That's the source of transparency, the source of anti-corruption, source of providing and ensuring the trust of the citizens. So yes, let me conclude here that there are different possibilities, there are different lessons learned, there are the peoples and the champions who have to work together in order to move forward in that direction.
Great, thank you so much, Zurab, for sharing. It's clear, I think, that there's a trend here emerging that yes, there's absolutely room for an open source, for collaboration, knowledge sharing, etc. But it is certainly unique to every country, and you need to tailor to the circumstances. Vitalie, can I ask you to conclude sort of the panel's view on this first question of open source and collaboration?
Yeah. Thank you, Sebastian. It's about how to give the direction. Standardized solution for all countries in Eurasia actually bothered me from the beginning. We all know that we are part of Western civilization, so we know that most of young professionals, especially in the IT sector, are looking to West. So let's not forget, Wild West gave us Silicon Valley. Now we are kind of Wild East. So countries in Eastern Europe and Eurasia are a kind of Wild East in this regard, and applying the principle of pendulum, we might expect that eastern side of the continent can offer something new. So that's why I will object on applying standardizing solutions at regional level. We have to keep in mind that, let's use the example of my country. 1/3 of our population left the country in the last 10 years for European and North American countries. Why? Because it's closer to them. So let's think from another, or let's see the things from another perspective. We are part of Western world. We have to find our niche there. More than 80% of our IT products are exported in Western and North American countries. Most of the companies investing in Moldova, IT companies, are from Europe, from Romania, from United States. So let's keep in mind that we are one world. Globalization is not ending up, and we have to adjust our countries and to see things from another perspective. Where the issue, from my perspectives, is how to provide equal access to governmental contracts for small companies, local companies, and big international companies. This is the issue, to create a kind of equal conditions, it's very relative in this case. Let's keep in mind that in some countries, like in mine, the most successful projects for e-government MPay solution was developed locally. The solution for digital document circulation was developed locally. So let's think about how to somehow to give the equal chances for small and global companies to governmental contracts. So this is the way we can somehow create proper conditions and to obtain the necessary grade of retention of IT professionals in our countries. In our country, IT Park, actually we gave to all companies, to all IT companies in the country, what most advanced countries are offering only to startups. We offered them a simplified interaction model with the government, a simplified taxation model. So it gave us the opportunity, the possibility to retain talented people in the countries. So the same issue have to be solved or in the same manner or approximately the same manner. We have to solve the issue of equalizing chances for companies to get access to contracts, to digital processes, and e-economy or digital economy processes will give another level of or will give new resources, new funds, new budgets for IT companies in my country. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Vitalie. Thank you so much, Vitalie, for closing out this first question on, again, open source. I would like to ask the panelists a second question, and really, if you could please keep it just to literally 1 minute. I know I'm being a bit unfair, but I do want to again turn to questions from the audience. And I remind all of our online viewers, there is an opportunity to ask questions and post questions online. They will be relayed to me so that I can read those out loud again for the panelists. And please do address your questions specifically to a panelist or ask for the panel's view as a collective. My second question is as follows. Again, what are the lessons learned from the initial government's digital transformation? So there are a number of governments across the world that are embarking on the same journey that you have started some time ago, and it would be great to understand a little bit what were the key success factors, and in retrospect, what were some of the things that you wish you wouldn't have done or would have done differently. So again, if I could ask everyone to, for very brief 1 minute, set up perhaps 1 or 2 lessons learned, both on the positive and the negative. So again, I'll start off with Bokhodir. If you could lead off this discussion, please.
Yes, I think one of the biggest lessons learned, not only in the area of digitization, but in developing any area of the economy, is political will. Unless you have a strong dedication from the top person, nothing will happen. I am not saying this, in terms of any country. I'm talking about specifically Uzbekistan, and going back to refer the same very important factors and aspects to consider, like culture and mentality. A very strong political will that has to come from the very top is a key, I would say, decisive factor that will, be able to shake things up. And with this, a dedicated team of young people. When I say young, I'm not necessarily referring to an age, but to an outlook. Still, unfortunately, Uzbekistan is considering, regardless of a dedication from the very top, especially considering that our prime minister comes originally from IT area. Nevertheless, we have this middle level of execution, where a lot of initiatives start to slow down. And the government and people in general see that there is a big necessity to format completely, I would even dare to say, that level, and replace them with young and open-minded people with new values. I think our experience for the last 3 years have shown this.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Bokhodir. Can I turn to Oleksandr next for your views on lessons learned?
And answering the question, I want to share some of the stuff with you. I hope you see my presentation. So I totally agree about political will, and this is really what helped achieve us in Ukraine ambitious goal. But another thing that I want to point out, and from my perspective, along with the political will which we have from our president Zelensky, it's also like a lesson is engage people, because political will can change, but if people are engaged, then there is no turning back. So I hope you can see on the screen that with the DIA is a brand name for the government services that we came up with. It contained people documents. So we moved actually all the paper, all the official papers to the smartphone. So we have passport, tax ID, driver license, car insurance, and many other things in a smartphone. And we gave it to people. And this was absolute success because more than 4 million people downloaded it. And for the whole modern history of Ukraine, there was the most downloadable app. So we beat TikTok, YouTube, Viber, Instagram, Facebook, all these applications. And now people have this on their smartphones, and they so get used to it. So even government change, or maybe in years president change, but what won't change is that people will still want this to go on. And I just want to show you this as an example of the lessons that we learn. And I will stop screen and probably hand off to other.
Perfect. No,
speaker.
thank you. Thank you so much, Oleksandr, for sharing. And great to see the leadership that your country is showing in, again, creating these types of platforms and apps for people to use. Evgeny, can I hear from you, please, again, on key lessons learned?
Yeah, sure. What I can say here is, for sure, I observed a lot of successful cases across the globe thanks to privilege that I'm working in international corporations. So, and I just want to mention one concrete example which actually was happening through the last like 3-4 years, and I was observing it, let's say, in life. So this is a small country of Malta. Actually, you know, this is from one perspective is a small country with centralized government operations, etc., and probably it helped somehow to them to make a huge, let's say, jump ahead in the digital development. They created the plan, the strategy, they followed it, and if I'm not mistaken, it can be some years, maybe some years are wrong, by figures are wrong, but probably started in 2017 and finished, let's say, the main phase last year, and they achieved in global rankings in CE region a position from, I guess, 37 or 47, something like this, to the first, just by applying the right approach in digital strategy of digital development. And I see really the impact, and I see really that citizens also having all the services in their smartphones, they can have access to any, let's say, services, they can resolve all the issues fast. And again, it started from basic level of infrastructure, hybrid cloud approach, etc., etc. And now we see the result, and this is really inspiring. So just for those who are interested, I can share more details about this case later on.
Great, thank you so much, Evgeny. Zurab, can I ask you again for just very briefly a set of lessons learned from your journey?
Of course, sure, thank you. Very briefly, it's important, definitely the strong political will, the right dedicated persons on board, partnership of the government, private sector, international organizations together, and have the vision and the strategy in terms of the developing. But also very briefly, let me provide the example about the lessons learned of Georgia. You know, I mentioned in my presentation we have the electronic signature, the qualified signature. I mentioned also some of the innovations which we do have right now. Electronic ID cards, for example, very simply, we have Georgians, more than 3 million Georgians have the electronic ID cards right now. Believe me, for Georgian population, that's the huge number. More than 1 million electronic signature certification was issued by Public Service Development Agency. That's also not a small number. But still, there are people who are refusing to obtain electronic ID cards because of different reasons. They prefer so-called laminated ID cards. A small number of people, but still it exists. And we respect, of course, their point of view. There are still people who are refusing because of different reasons having the electronic signature. They prefer to arrive at the place, so-called hard copy signature. And you know, the question is why? And I believe the answer is in awareness-raising campaigns. And that's one of the key lessons learned for us, because you need continuous and sustainable awareness-raising campaigns, especially when you are providing and introducing something new. You know, when there is new has the questions, and you need to answer those questions preventively, actually, in order not to have some post-factum effect on that. And that's the area I think we need to improve. And that's the area that all of us have to be together. And by all of us, I mean not only us, but of course every single citizen of Georgia. And that's the primary duty of the government. I represent the government, so I believe that's the primary duty of the government, first of all, to work on that. And we are doing our best, but of course there are rooms for the improvement. So that's one of the lessons learned I could highlight maybe in this.
Right, no, fantastic. Thank you so much, Zurab. Vitalie, can I ask you again to close off this question on lessons learned? Any thoughts from Moldova's experience, please?
Thank you, Sebastian. It's about two thoughts, at least two thoughts. So for me, it was amazing to discover that during the Soviet era, Moldova was or has in its GDP structure 30% on electronics. Thanks God, we now very well know what we were doing, electronics, and for what, we know for what. So when we were designing new policy framework, we actually thought to restart Moldova as a technological destination. The journey teaches us that we can do that. So we almost did that. Now the IT products and services their share in our exports are more than exports of wines, but we're exporting a lot of wine. So this is the first thought, restarting Moldova as a technological destination. So it was almost done, and it really worked. The second thing is about let me say directly, is about trust and security, and is about privacy. From some reasons, yes, we discovered that human rights, privacy, and so on are very important, and we've created this kind of agencies, legislation, and so on and so on. But at the same time, it somehow discourage the development, the promotion of new solutions, new digital solutions, and it have to be taken into consideration. I discovered it when we were implementing the 112 service at national level. So this is about saving lives. At the same time, this is about privacy. We have to keep in mind that people are very reactive, or they're reacting very, very quickly when some solutions are going wrong. So keeping their trust, offering reliable solutions is what we need and what we have to keep in mind, moving faster, moving very fast with digitization of our societies.
Great.
So let's restart our countries as technological destinations. Let's think about rights, privacy, and trust and security. And let's provide to the rest of the world what we can provide. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. So that concludes the panel discussion. My sincere thank you. And now I'd like to turn things over to Q&A. We have two questions from the online audience. The first is as follows. Today, there's a lot of talk about the use of AI, artificial intelligence. The European Union also raises questions of the ethics of artificial intelligence. What do you think? Can artificial intelligence take over part of the functions of government in the near future? and what ethical issues arise from this. Can I please perhaps ask our government representative, notably Vitalie perhaps, as well as Zurab and Oleksandr, to just very briefly answer this question, giving the government view on, again, the role of AI.
Shall I start?
Perhaps you can start, Zurab, and then Oleksandr and Vitalie, please.
Yes, thank you. No, very briefly, I will not translate it in terms of taking the role of the government, the artificial intelligence, but I would translate it as a source of improving the role of the government and improving the functions of the state itself. So artificial intelligence, yes, that's one of the key areas right now in the European Union, not only, and yes, there is an ethics code right now under the conduction process and to be carried out. But again, that's the very useful tool to use it correctly in terms of the planning your policy and improving the policy planning as well as implementation of the policy.
All right, thank you so much. Oleksandr, a view on this, please?
Well, first of all, we recently created a AI committee with the help of Ministry of Digital Transformation. So we gather all the expertise in this committee and trying to come up with their implementation of AI in our everyday life in the government business. Well, personally, we haven't faced, I personally can think about it, and we haven't faced with any ethical issues. Our major goal is to use AI to process big data at this point, maybe some other things, but I can give you an example. So our Minister of Justice recently came up with a project along with us for the penitentiary system. So they want to analyze behavior of convicts, of the criminals, in order to figure out if how they behave inside the system and outside penitentiary establishments, to kind of predict if they are ready to be part of society or not. And based on that, AI have to decide, shall we put this man into green zone, yellow zone, or red zone? So, and pay more attention or less attention to this person. So this is kind of an example, and maybe at some point ethical issues will arise, but for now we're just experimenting and
thank you so much.
Don't see it.
Thank you so much, Oleksandr. Vitalie, very briefly, because we're running out of time, just a quick 15-20 second response to the question on artificial intelligence, please.
For sure, we need that. One example, we were among the first countries with open data coalitions and so on and so on. We opened wide volumes, massives of data, and now added value. So we need artificial intelligence, at least in this kind of big data processing, big data analytics. For sure, we need it. From another perspective, government is seeing it as a potential area of development. So this is covered by IT Park law, data processing. So we offer necessary preconditions for companies in that regard. Regarding the ethics, following our society will follow the EU practice in this regard. Ethics, human rights are very sensitive issue. So from this point of view, we'll follow EU practice. From technological part of view, we are open, we need that, and we'll try to experience in this.
Great. So with that, let me come to closure on this, again, panel session on the state in a smartphone and the role of digitizing public services. Again, I wanted to begin by sincerely thanking all the panelists for taking time, from what I know are very busy days, to come and address both the online and the audience here in Tbilisi. I thank you for coming and also for following all the good social distancing practices. Just in 15 seconds or less, my takeaways. Number one, the digitization of public services is perhaps not a silver bullet, but it certainly is a golden opportunity to further drive growth, increase inclusion, transparency and accountability, and ultimately trust in the government. There are 6 basic building blocks for this to occur. Number 1, you need to have a clear strategy coupled with real commitment and political will to drive this forward. Number 2, you need to have the digital infrastructure in place to be able to reach all of the population and not just a select few. Number 3, we need to have the laws and regulations to manage the risks, as we just heard, some of the ethical concern, as well as to ensure for interoperability. Number 4, education, education, education. You need the skills, the workforce to be able to deliver on this. Number 5, the ecosystem, in particular with respect to public and private partnerships, also including universities. And number 6, and finally, awareness raising, making sure that the benefits of the digital economy are widespread and made publicly available. In terms of the open source and knowledge sharing, I think that there was a resounding yes. However, it needs to be tailored, it needs to be individualized to the specific country context, and there needs to be a bottom-up approach, great opportunities, as we heard, for young startups, innovative IT companies and firms to provide solutions to governments, and then hopefully to be able to spread those across borders. So with that, again, my sincere thank you, and look forward to the great remainder of the day in a very important session here. Thank you finally to Strategist for organizing this State and IT Eurasian Forum. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Have a great day.